Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm always having technical issues. Um, yeah, so sorry I'm late. Yeah, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. So this might be a clunky stream here, but we're going to go for it anyway. Um, yeah, and now I've eaten into my time a bit, so it's probably going to be kind of short because I'm going to have to pick up my kid in a little bit. Why is it blinking down there? Jeez, still having technical issues. Um, let's see if that fixed it. Sure didn't. All right. Well, it works there. Okay, great. Let's see if I can get that iPad down there. There we go. All right. So, yeah, welcome to the first time I've streamed in probably a decade. And so things are a bit different now with settings and stuff. I think the last time I streamed was back in the days when we streamed with Skype. So, yeah. So I'm kind of a Luddite now. So I'm getting old. I don't know. So, geez, why is that doing that? I can't have the iPad blinking like that. I'm supposed to be drawing. So anyway, real quick, for those who don't know, I was gonna kind of talk about why I'm doing live streaming. It's basically because it would appear that I disappeared from YouTube again, and that was completely unintentional. At first, it was other technical issues, and then it was just kind of life stuff that kind of took over. But I have been working on videos in the background, and got one finished and one almost finished. Those are on, the one that's finished is on Patreon, and the scenes for this kind of bigger video is also on Patreon. I've just been putting up the scenes as I finish them up there, and that'll constitute like a larger video. So yeah, so I unintentionally, because of life and things, appeared to have disappeared, but I have been working on stuff, and I kind of decided that I was toying around too with, like, I like to treat my main videos as kind of short films. I guess they're not maybe super professional, but one day I hope to get there. But yeah, I like to treat those like short films, so those take a lot longer to do. Especially, I don't make any money off of YouTube. I'm not monetized, and that stuff takes time. So in the interim, I have smaller ideas to do, topics to discuss, things like that, whatever. And I thought, well, I'll get stuff done, and I'll share that stuff on YouTube, things that maybe that I don't feel need to be turned into a short film, stuff like that. Plus, I have been, I won't say neglecting, because I've been working on things, but some of the things that are important for me to finish, this is personal stuff, or personal reasons, I guess. If you've seen any of the Cursed Sketchbook videos, I think I've done 3. It's important for me to finish that sketchbook. I'm being facetious when I call it cursed, but it is something that I, was adamant about finishing, and then, I just kind of dropped it. I was getting wrapped up being a drunk dating a chick that I was in a band with and being an idiot. So so it's important for me to finish that, because I think I said in the video, it's kind of emblematic of who I was, is wanting to start stuff and then dropping it. So so I need to do that for myself. There's my animated short that I've been working on, and I've been working on some of the soundtrack stuff for it, and it's a project that's taking a lot longer than I thought to finish, but that's also because I think I've been trying to spend more time working on some videos. So doing the live stream, it's going to give me like kind of dedicated time that for me to work on those kind of things. So in the live stream, I'll probably be doing sketchbook stuff. I'm going to work on the animated film. What I know from working on comic books in the past and sharing those on YouTube a long time ago was that if I give too much away, mentally it tells me that I've already told the story. The second thing, I'm worried. I'm not so much worried that someone's going to steal my ideas or anything like that, but I'm more worried that the surprise is going to be gone, if that makes sense, So I'm not necessarily trying to hide what I'm doing with the animated short, because you'll see stuff and you'll be able to kind of pick up on more of the flavor, the genre, probably stuff like that. But I'm definitely want to make it a surprise as much as possible and not give away too much. So there's that. But anyway, so I want to do that stuff with the live stream. And what else was I going to say about that? I feel like I had it all in my head, and then I got kind of flustered with the technical stuff. But yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of paying myself first. I usually get up early, and I found that since my lifestyle isn't like, playing in bands and going to a bunch of shows and late night and stuff like that, I'm actually kind of a day person now. So I get up pretty early, and before I have to go out and hustle for money, I usually give myself about an hour to 4 hours in the morning before I have to do that to work on things. And so, these are probably going to be about an hour. Today's going to be shorter because I have to, at this point, leave in about half an hour. And they're not really going to be scheduled right now, because some days I'm just going to be writing, like scripts probably for the main videos, things like that. And, that probably is not going to be fun to watch me sit at my desk and write, things like that. So, yeah. So I think I might have covered everything I need to. So this is to be loose. This is to I don't know, just be pressure free from my main videos, which sounds like I'm trying to escape them when I put it that way, and I'm not, because I enjoy making them. They just take a very long time, and this kind of makes me accountable in public, So selfishly, I'm probably doing this more for me than anybody else, but I'm happy for anybody to be here and go along with me on this ride, stuff like that. So see, there's a lot more people here than I thought. I thought there was going to be no one, actually, to be honest. So thank you all for showing up. Looking California film. Okay. Luhan. Hello, Jim. Dylan. Good. You know what? Just thank you. Usually when I watch someone's live streams and they kind of lag like I'm doing, and they mention everybody, I kind of skip through that. So, but anyway, thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words on like the graphics and stuff. So let's get to talking about OZZY. If my iPad will work, I'll start drawing, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit about what OZZY has meant to me in my life. Let's see if I can get this to work, though. So I need to go there. Is that working? Yeah, it's going to be a real clunky one. Hopefully it doesn't start flashing green here. Anyway, so I've loaded up a bunch of reference photos of OZZY here in the iPad, and I'm using Procreate. Oh my God, is it blinking again? All right, Jesus Christ. So maybe this one won't. This one will just be for for now, and I'll do another live stream where it's not so annoying with this blinking stuff. Hopefully I'll figure this out. So I'm using this software called OBS, and I heard like really good things about it, and I've been having nothing but trouble with it. So let's see if I can reload it or reload this uh, iPad on here so I can talk about OZZY and draw some. So anyway, I've got different eras of OZZY from going from him in Black Sabbath, which is blinking on the screen right now. I have to unplug it and plug it back in, maybe. Oh, God. Well, there's something. Is that? All right. Anyway, sorry about all the clunkiness. So let's talk about OZZY. So it was probably, we'll see if I can talk and draw at the same time. I haven't done that for a long time. And let me back up. So yeah, I'm in Procreate in the iPad, using a chromograph pencil. It's called Deutscher Colorist Toothy. So there's the technical. Oh, that's another thing I was going to bring up. Is that on the main channel, I'm not super interested in making tutorial videos. They kind of, I did it a long time ago, and they kind of bore me a little bit to make. Because I'd rather, have like stories and stuff in my main videos. And but here, I'm happy to do any kind of tutorial as I'm working, if anyone's interested. But anyway, so OZZY. So I think it was 1979. I was about 8 years old, and I went to an arcade, and they were playing the stereo in the arcade, and it was rock radio of the time, and I was according to my mom. Well, and I remember this too, but just her memory's better, and we actually talked about this recently. I went to go visit in California, where I'm from, just recently, and she brought up all this stuff from the past. I got into music really, really early, and I think even before I was in kindergarten, I had like an old like Bakelite radio. It was just AM with a big dial on it. Something that used to be able to find at garage sales, like super easy back in the day. That somebody's got on Etsy or eBay or something like that, or some mid-century section at an antique mall now for $500. It was probably less than $1 when I got it, but and then my parents, being their age, they had records. It was, a lot of 50s and 60s, early rock and roll, and, stuff like that. So when I was real young, I was got really into like Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, and I should say, I'm still really into that stuff. But I just remember sitting there like coloring and drawing and stuff, and listening to my radio, and it's AM, that arm sucks. The AM station, it was oldies, which is kind of funny because it wasn't really that old yet, considering. But anyway, so I was listening to all that kind of stuff, and occasionally I would get like modern music, which at that time would be the 70s, but my parents were, by the time the 70s came around, they were into like the yacht rock stuff and Helen Reddy, and they'd gotten into, all the country music stuff that was kind of popular because of, probably Urban Cowboy and, I just wasn't, John Denver and stuff like that. I just wasn't into it. I'd get excited when I found out about Alice Cooper, and I'd saw him on the Muppet Show and stuff like that. But anyway, at some point, I think that radio broke or something, because then I got I could listen to FM radio, and that was like where rock and roll was. And I started getting introduced to AC/DC pretty young, and Van Halen, the Cars, Cheap Trick, stuff like that. And but somehow at 8 years old, Black Sabbath had escaped me. But anyway, so I'm in this arcade, and that era, if I remember, it was like Pac-Man wasn't even out yet. It was Asteroids and Space Invaders, and this game that used to piss me off so much because I sucked at it, called Lunar Lander. And there was Pong, but this place, it was like it had all these blacklight posters on the wall with the black lights hanging over them, and paint, like blacklight paint all over the walls to make it look like it was outer space, and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, they're just playing like the rock and roll radio station, but on a decent system at the time. So I hadn't heard like a lot of these bands that I was kind of passively listening to a little bit, because at that age I was still, this isn't my Chuck Berry, and stuff like that. But I could actually kind of hear it better than these crappy radios I had. And Never Say Die came on, the song, Black Sabbath. So yeah, if I was 8, yeah, so 79. So some of my timeline might be a little bit off, because at this age sometimes I put like a month of activities into one story of this one weekend I had sometimes, but I remember, it's just kind of this like kind of nerdy kid. I'm into comics. I started getting like some of the early Dungeons and Dragons stuff, but had no one to play with. I just liked the pictures, and I was just kind of a dorky kid. I had a bowl cut, but Never Say Die came on, and it just like something, my eyes just went wide, and I don't remember what game I was playing, but I was kind of not there playing the game, because I was just thinking about the song, and I had to know who it was, because it was like, my mom was probably in a different store, and she might have given me like a couple bucks to play video games, and I might not hear the radio station because it wasn't what we were listening to in the car, and I didn't even know the radio ID, that kind of stuff. I wasn't, I was young, and there's like this kid who was working, and it almost looked like a DJ booth where they had him set up. And because it was like the time, and it was like, arcades, modern technology. It was like they were trying to make it all, outer space, because we're playing video games and computers, crazy. That's sci-fi. And so he had like what I guess would be a proto battle vest, jean jacket, and he had a couple patches like Led Zeppelin, who at that point I hadn't really heard, or I think I probably heard him on the radio, but again, I was listening to these mono speakers that were really tiny, when like 50s and early 60s rock and roll sounds fine on, because that was mostly recorded mono, things like that. So anyway, so I'm listening to this and kind of trying to get my courage to talk to this guy. He's got long hair, and he's got his vest on, and he's got kind of that like teenage cool guy scowl, and stuff like that, and so I was like, this is it's too much. This music is monumental. What is this? So got my courage up, and I walked up to the booth that he was sitting in, or standing in, or whatever, and I look up, and I, excuse me, who's this on? Who's this playing? And he just looked at me like I just like farted in his face, and he goes, it's Black Sabbath. Like I was some idiot, but I mean, this is some teenager dude, and I'm like 8, so then it became this like quest. I've got to get Black Sabbath. Um, I had gotten some records of my own um, at the time, not very many. Uh, I guess I was always kind of a weird kid. I didn't get into like the as much of like the power records story albums that kids were listening to my age until actually a little bit later when I was just like, oh, these are kind of fun, but um, I wanted music and stuff, and I bought some pretty embarrassing stuff, but it's kind of a free time to be a kid. You just like what you like. It's before like getting into punk and like really getting into metal, and the scenes become, like, they have their little rules and things like that. But um, so yeah, it was kind of this quest of like, okay, I'm gonna start doing chores because I got an allowance, and I think it was pretty meager, like a quarter or something like that, which seemed fine to me at the time because when I was comic books were only 35 cents around that time. Um, so if I got a buck, I could get like candy and a comic book and you know play whatever video game was at the 7-Eleven. Um, but yeah, so then it's like, I've got to get Black Sabbath, and I didn't for a while. Um, and I was doing some chores and stuff, and what I didn't know is my family was not doing well financially. Because around there, if that's 79 ish, around 1980, uh, I think the movie came out in 79 in theaters, but in 1980 it was on TV. It was Roger Corman's Rock and Roll High School with the Ramones. And that was another moment of like, what is this? And and I think I'd gotten uh, like a Xanadu soundtrack or something like that with ELO and um, uh, why is their name escaping me? Olivia Newton-John, duh. And that was kind of as hard as I was getting at the time. And so now I've got this quest for Sabbath. I've got this quest for the Ramones. And I remember watching the movie with my mom and Rock and Roll High School, and we were doing so badly financially that she was telling me I need to save my money because there's no soundtrack for the movie Rock and Roll High School because this is a fictional band, and it's only for the movie, and it's a TV movie. Meanwhile, I mean, she was in her 20s at the time. She was well aware of who the Ramones were, and we just didn't have the money, and she I think we had just, if memory serves, I have these like brief glimpses of the gas lines, if anyone's old enough to remember those. In California, it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If your license plate ended in an even number, you could get gas, and odd the other day. And I think Sunday they were closed because I don't know if it was because just it was older days and Sunday was that kind of stuff. Uh, but so things weren't well financially, and we go in the 80s. There's two recessions in the 80s and stuff like that. So even though I was getting this meager allowance on occasion, like with the Xanadu soundtrack, for example, it felt like my parents would throw me a bone or something every now and again. But anyway, so I'm trying to find this stuff, this music, and trying to figure out how I can afford it. And I start talking to. I had some older neighbors at the time, and can I pick your weeds? Can I mow your yard? And stuff like that. And so I could get these records. So now I get a little bit like maybe a year older or something like that, and I now have a kind of a better radio, little boom box in my room, and I'm listening to AM radio or FM radio now, right? So now I'm really getting into Van Halen and AC/DC and Judas Priest and stuff like that. And I remember there was a DJ who was talking about had left Black Sabbath, but he's got this new record out. And I don't think, at that time I must gotten to be 9 or 10 or something. I didn't know any of the members' names or anything like that. And so, sorry, I'm talking more than I'm drawing, but yeah. So Ozzy, Blizzard of Oz, blah blah blah, and Crazy Train was new, and now it's just it's almost like a standard. You know what I mean? Like jazz people have their standards. It's almost like a rock and roll metal standard at this point. It's just so classic. And even people I think who don't listen to this kind of music, they know that song, or like they've at least heard it in a movie or something. It was so big, but it was like crazy mind blowing. And I had enough money. I remember it was $7 to buy vinyl at the time, and so I rode my bike and I got Blizzard of Oz, and I came home with it, and we're getting early Satanic Panic time, and my mom flipped out. Wanted me to get rid of it. She finally relented, let me keep it, but she didn't want to see it and she didn't want to hear it. And man, it just blew me away. It was one of those pivotal moments. I'm glad I had the rock and roll history I did, where I started with my parents' music and I had an old AM radio, so listening to the 50s and the 60s, because by the 60s you're really planting the seeds for what would become punk and metal and some stuff, like psychedelic and garage and mod and stuff like that, which is what would change my life, becoming a teenager and playing in the kind of bands I did and all that kind of stuff. But it really started that day hearing Never Say Die. Totally blew me away. Changed everything for me. I mean, I still love Fats Domino. I still like Chuck Berry, Little Richard, all the classics. I like the Zombies, mellow mod band from, the mod era, stuff like that. The Kinks. Love the Kinks still. The Who. But it was, I really liked that stuff, but it didn't change my life in a way where I needed to play music. Kiss, I should bring that up. Kiss was such a big pop culture thing when I was a kid in the 70s, too. Because, it was like, they had the look, and at the time they seemed really hard. Now you just listen to that 70s stuff, and it's party music. It's fun party music. But they still didn't have the effect of hearing Black Sabbath for the first time. There was that inclination of like, this is really cool. But it was Black Sabbath that made me want to play. So anyway, so I've got Blizzard of Oz. I'm listening to it. And I just over and over and over. And, yeah, it was just so rad. And then my parents, if anybody is old enough, remembers the Columbia House Tape and Record Club. And they used to do all those promos where you get 10 cassette tapes for, I think you spent maybe you spent the going price for one, and then you got the other 9 for a penny. And so, sorry, I got distracted by the chat there. But so my parents started doing that, and then they started doing the thing where you cancel and then you re-up so you can get more stuff, for that penny discount. And one of the things that's interesting is my dad was more of a jazz guy. I mean, he liked the 50s rock and roll. The 60s was more my mom. I think by the 60s my dad thought he was really, cool, loungy guy, and was getting in all Miles Davis and Charles Mingus and stuff like that. So he was getting that stuff, but oddly enough, he bought me a Judas Priest Sin After Sin cassette from Columbia House one time and just handed it to me. He goes, I got this for you. I thought you'd like this. And I think it's because they didn't know what to buy, because you couldn't get like a whole catalog. It was kind of like what they had available. But anyway, so we're sitting there and looking through whatever, they sent in the mail. And my parents are selecting their cassette tapes, and they asked, do you want something? And I see little black and white, little rectangle, Black Sabbath Paranoid. Yes, I want Paranoid. Okay. Then I got it, saw the album cover on a cassette in color, and to be honest, at 9 or 10 or whatever it was when I got it, I was like, this doesn't seem very tough because it's that that dude kind of Dayglow colors with motorcycle helmet, like swinging a sword, and he's kind of blurry. I don't know. But I put it on, and oh my God, I was like, this is the best. This is the best thing. And so somehow in my memory, it probably took some time, but the first Black Sabbath album came up in Columbia House, and I got that. And then I started understanding when people were like, when I first heard this band, they scared the shit out of me. Because, it starts off with Black Sabbath, from Black Sabbath. As me and my daughter like to say, Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath on the album Black Sabbath. With the storm and the bells and just that dong, dong, dong. Which, by the way, my daughter's a teenager now, and she likes all classic metal stuff, and I've recently started to teach her guitar, and that's her first song that she's learning right now. So that warms my heart. Get to pass on some Sabbath to my daughter. But anyway, so it I guess, I was a weird kid. I liked horror movies and stuff. I used to have to sneak some horror movies that don't seem very scary, really, now for my parents at the time. So I was intrigued by all that stuff. And so, yeah, it was scary-ish, but scary in a way that, and this isn't not me being a cool guy or trying to act like I'm brave or something like that, but it was scary in the way that you're a kid and you're walking past the neighborhood haunted house, say, it's some old abandoned house, and maybe there's a rumor of the old person that lives there that's a witch or or whatever, and don't trick or treat there because they'll eat you, and but you're walking past there at night and you just hear the howling from like another realm of these evil spirits, and they want to kill you and stuff, or steal your soul. And instead of being the kid that runs from that, if Black Sabbath is that haunted house, that first song on their first record, it was like looking at that haunted house, feeling something maybe a little uneasy, but in an exciting way where you look at your friends and they're starting to run and you go, no, come on, let's go check it out. That's what it was like. It was probably the first band that was like this touchstone moment for me, to like just really get into this music. And this comes, one of those artists, I've drawn since I can remember, and yada yada. But some people get disappointed in this. When I was a career illustrator, it was because my music career ended. Had it not, I would have stayed a musician and been a hobbyist as an artist. So anyway, it was like a big moment, and at that point, my little brother has started to play piano. Because my great grandmother had died, and one of her and my great grandfather, who I never met, their wedding gifts was this upright piano, and I think my parents had read something about, if kids play an instrument, they're going to be smarter, and all that kind of stuff, and it was around that time they're like, okay, well, started being interested. I want to play music, and so my parents were like, great, you're gonna learn piano like your brother. And I was like, no, 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 no. I wanted to be a drummer, and then that was too loud for them, and I wanted to play guitar, and you know, but again, we didn't have the money, stuff like that. So I just decided I don't care, because I do have to admit, like the song "Changes" I thought was a little weak. As I've gotten older, I really like it. you know, I've heard people say, "What, are you getting soft?" And I'm like, no, just more nuanced. Because I still listen to a lot of music that would, that peels paint for most people. But anyway, so where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so I really wanted to play, but I just couldn't, and so somehow I started to like even mythologize some of the stuff I was listening to as like, well, this is like, you're from another world if you can, play rock and roll music and be a rock star and play this stuff. And and I was young enough also at the time. We had just gotten cable back when it was just a box, and there was like only 20 channels on a slider. And there was a show called Night Flight, and they play B movies and like rock and roll stuff, and sometimes it's like community access punk rock stuff. And I remember they played a live Black Sabbath show, and it was on at like midnight. And my parents were super pissed, and because I was like, well, I have to stay up till midnight, and they wanted me to go to bed at like 9 or something. And my parents were also those parents in the summertime you could still hear your friends outside playing because it was late, or it was light later, and they would be like, well, you have to go to bed. I was like, but yeah, so I was watching Night Flight, and I was confused because Ozzy wasn't singing. It was Dio. And that introduced me to Dio, but at first I didn't like it because it wasn't Ozzy, Now I love Dio, and Dio's probably one of my daughter's like top 2 or 3. But anyway, so there's just like, just seeing like Tony Iommi, the way he plays, it's like so casual. Like the dude creates a genre by cutting off his fingers on accident, and getting a little bit dark with what he's playing, and he had that like biker mustache. I don't know. I just thought he was super cool. But anyway, it seemed, these are rock gods, and there's no way someone like me can do it. But then finally, I get even a little bit older, and someone's given away a guitar, or there was one that was like super cheap in my memory. And so my parents kind of relent. You're not playing drums, but you can play guitar. And I think I had, my mom says 6 months. So I'll go with that. I thought it was less, but so I had about 6 months of guitar. And Paranoid was one of the first songs I learned, which is kind of cool because, at that time I hadn't quite gotten into punk yet. Or I didn't know I was into it, I should say. And I didn't, oh, God damn it, I got to pick up my daughter here. So I'm going to have to cut this short. But I'll try to finish this real quick. So I learned Paranoid, which if you play it more open chords, you can make it sound like a Ramones song. I learned a bunch of Ramones songs. I learned House of the Rising Sun from the Animals, and then it was like became accessible. But yeah, it's all because of Black Sabbath and Ozzy that I went down that route. And then when I got to be about 13 or something is when I really heard like punk rock and hardcore punk stuff, Dead Kennedys, Minor Threat, Black Flag, all that kind of stuff. And that was the next moment that I had that like, oh my God moment that I had like with Sabbath and Ozzy. And I used to listen to the Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman, which when I think about it, they're like a double album, those Ozzy records. But yeah, it's all good. I love all that stuff. And yeah, so it didn't seem like a surprise. I watched some of the live stream of Ozzy's last show in Birmingham. It wasn't a surprise. My dad had Parkinson's too, and so some of the looks on his face I recognized. And yeah, so it wasn't a huge surprise, but it still hit real hard because his influence, was so big. And I'm just one little guy, and obviously big around the world. So anyway, sorry about my technical difficulties earlier. Got into more talking than drawing, and I've got to go pick up my kid. So I will try to be back as soon as possible and finish up this illustration. I want to kind of maybe try to do some kind of montage of Ozzy during the different eras of when I was into him. And maybe I'll talk about some shows that I saw, because I got to see Ozzy and some Black Sabbath reunions and stuff. Anyway, thanks everybody for showing up. I would love to read the chat, but I feel like I need to get into like the drawing, and talking is pat my stomach and rubbing my head and stuff like that. So hopefully I'll be able to read the stuff and maybe respond in the next live stream. But anyway, thank you everybody for showing up and listening to me and hanging out. And probably going to do this real soon, maybe even tomorrow morning. We'll see. I only have my daughter for the weekend, so depends on what we do. But yeah, thanks a lot. I'll talk to you soon.